Hi there, my name is Stephen Chu and I'm a professor of psychology. I study how to improve teaching and learning. I'm creating this video to help students make a successful academic transition to college level work. So in general, I'll be talking about the transition from high school to college, but what I'm going to be talking about is also relevant to students who are transferring to a new institution, say going from a 2-year school to a 4-year school. And it's especially relevant for students who are first-generation college students, the first in their family to attend college. So the transition to college is difficult under any circumstances, but it's especially difficult since we're moving from remote learning to what is likely to be in-class college level work. So let's talk about the transition to college and what it entails. The transition to college is a major life transition, personally, socially, as well as academically. Most students are moving away from their family for the first time. They're creating their whole new identity. They're meeting a lot of new people, and they're worried about making friends and making a good impression. And that alone is a major part of the transition, but we're going to focus on the academic transition, which is also challenging. If you look at the research on this, it shows how challenging it is. Surveys of faculty, for example, show that the vast majority of them feel like students coming into college have major gaps in their college level preparation. One survey a few years ago found that 96% of faculty at 2-year schools felt like their students were not adequately prepared in at least one area, and 88% of faculty at 4-year schools felt like their students lacked adequate preparation in at least one area. If you ask students themselves, they'll report the same thing. One survey a few years ago found that almost half of first-year college students felt like they were not adequately prepared in at least one area for the work they were expected to do at college. So it is a major challenge to make that academic transition to college level work, and it has significant consequences. So if you look at the 6-year college completion rate, it's at 59%. In other words, for any cohort of college students starting in a given year, 6 years later, only 59% of them will have completed an undergraduate degree. Now, that means that more than 40% have not completed their degree. For some of them, this may be due to obligations such like finances or family obligations. For others, they may find that their career paths don't require a college degree. But for a very large percentage of these people, they find that the struggle of adjusting to college, especially the academic work, is just too great for them. They may have the ability to succeed, but they may have struggled their first year. They may have become discouraged. They may have made poor grades, and for whatever reason, they decided not to continue their college education. So you also find that these rates are even lower. The completion rates are even lower for minorities, first-generation college students, and students who are required to take multiple remedial courses. So this video is to help students in general, but especially those students who are at risk to make a successful academic transition to college level work. Okay, now what causes this transition to be such a challenge? You hear a lot about like the dumbing down of high schools, and that may play a role, but I know of plenty very dedicated, highly competent high school teachers. I suspect the difference is simply the context, the learning context between high school and college. They are vastly different learning contexts, and the learning strategies and habits that you use in high school oftentimes are not just ineffective, but they're counterproductive when you get to college. So let's talk about the difference in the learning context between high school and college. I divide it up into 3 different areas: contact hours, high school teachers versus college teachers, and other differences. So starting with contact hours. There are far fewer contact hours, class meeting time between high school classes and college classes. High school classes often meet 4 or 5 times a week, almost daily. College classes meet once, twice, sometimes 3 times per week, so much less often. Plus, high school classes often last the entire year. College classes tend to last one semester. If you add up the contact hours, then college classes have only about a third the contact hours as a typical high school class. That means that there is much more independent learning. A college class, they may cover less than half the material that you're responsible for on exams. You're expected to learn that on your own. Whereas in high school, there's much more time to present that information and reinforce that information. So that's called scaffolding, where the teacher will provide activities that will sort of support and promote your learning. There's much less of that at the college level. There are fewer learning activities, fewer like worksheets and videos to watch and learning support activities, fewer feedback opportunities where you get a sense from your work if you're really understanding what the teacher is trying to teach. And also there are fewer assessments in college. So you may only have like a couple of exams. Each one is worth half your grade. So you have fewer exams for much higher stakes. Oftentimes in high school, from what I've seen, by the time you get to the last exam, your grade is pretty much set. In college, your performance on the final exam can make the difference between passing and failing. It can range from an A to a C. So the assessments that you have in college are much fewer and much higher stakes. Then there are differences in high school teachers versus college teachers. High school teachers are trained as teachers. They have teaching certificates. So they went to a school of education and were instructed in how to teach. Then they specialize in a particular area. College teachers are subject experts. We've spent years studying our subject area, and then we choose to teach, or we are assigned to teach. We may have no preparation or training in how to teach at all. So high school teachers are teachers who teach particular subjects. College teachers are subject matter experts who are teaching. So college faculty are less well trained in how to teach. They have less instruction in how to help students to learn. Plus, they may not prioritize student learning. College professors have a variety of responsibilities, doing research, teaching, supervising graduate students, and their main priority may not be in teaching. That doesn't mean they don't care about teaching. It just may not be what gets them promoted and what gets them recognition. And then because college teachers are subject matter experts first, they likely require a deeper level of understanding than what you were expecting, what was expected in high school, just because they may have spent decades studying their subject areas, and that influences what they expect their students to understand. Then you have other differences. So there's less peer social support. In high school, you may have been in classes with people you've known all your life, and you may have the same students in many of your classes. In college, you don't know the majority of students, and you have different students in each class. So there's less peer social support. You have to go out of your way to get to know your classmates and to cooperate with them. And then finally, one major difference is that high school is a culture of completion, where they're trying to get students to successfully complete high school because that is their main charge. And there are major problems if they don't have a good high school completion rate, versus college, which is a college of access. You're paying to take a course. You're paying for the opportunity to take that course. And the college professor is not as concerned necessarily with your personal success or your graduation. College institutions are interested in your success and completion, but individual faculty may be not so concerned about your success and whether you succeed in a course or not. So there are major differences in the learning context between high school and college, and these differences can lead to counterproductive thought processes. So there's a set of beliefs, which I call beliefs about learning that make you stupid, that are really counterproductive when you get to college. If you have these beliefs, then they're going to work against you. And oftentimes these beliefs were sort of created. They were okay in high school, but now they become counterproductive when you get to college. So the first one is that learning is fast. Students often underestimate how quickly they can learn. Part of this is because when you were in high school, you met almost daily and you got a lot of learning support. So you maybe think, well, I just need 2 days to prepare for this exam. Well, you get to college, you have only a third of the contact hours, and 2 days before, there's just a ton of work that you have to do. There's a lot of independent learning that you fail to do. You can't prepare for an exam in 2 days if you haven't been keeping up. So learning actually is a much slower, more laborious process because a lot of that learning depends on your study behavior outside of class. Okay, being good at a subject matter is a matter of inborn talent rather than hard work. College level classes require a lot of independent learning, and that effort may seem like you're not good at something. You may think that I should be naturally good at this sort of thing, and that's not the attitude to take. No matter what you pursue, it's going to require work and effort on your part. That's just a natural part of going through college. You need to find a subject matter that is interesting enough to you that you're willing to do that work. And you need to find and do the work that is most likely going to result in learning, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So just because what you are pursuing requires a lot of work, don't think that means that you aren't going to be good at that subject matter. All faculty that you are going to be working with at one point had to put in the same number of hours to become good at what they do. Then knowledge is composed of isolated facts. This is a very common problem among incoming students, and it's a byproduct of the fact that you're dealing with teachers who are subject matter experts now, who spent years studying their topics. So let's see how this goes. So oftentimes students will have an understanding that's disconnected. There'll be a set of facts. So this is attention, a topic that you might study in introductory psychology, for example, and you might try to memorize 4 different facts about attention. It's like it's very selective, like a narrow beam in a dark room. It prevents us from being overwhelmed. We can't multitask. And then there's something called the Stroop effect, which you'll learn about if you take general psych. The faculty understanding is much more complex and sophisticated, and it's interrelated set of facts. And this is the way the faculty member is going to test you. They're going to test you in ways that require you to reason through problems, to make connections and inferences. So if you memorize information as an isolated set of facts, then you're going to be at a real disadvantage on exams. And if you use electronic flashcards or flashcards, it's really tempting to memorize definitions as isolated facts, and that will really hurt you. Okay, the next one is I'm really good at multitasking, especially during class or studying. You may have been able to study and try and multitask in high school. That may have been possible because of the sheer number of contact hours you had. But remember, you have a lot of independent learning in college, and you have fewer assessments that are higher stakes. So it really is going to reveal the cost of multitasking to you. We are not geared to multitask, and it can be extremely costly in the college level context. Okay, so how do we make a successful academic transition to college? There are 4 things I'm going to cover here. Creation of good habits, using your learning resources, common pitfalls to avoid, and then developing what's called self-regulation of learning, which kind of brings everything together. So let's talk about each of these in turn. So the key to successful college level work, I think, is creation of good habits. A habit is a default routine that you follow in a given situation. So they're automatic, like getting ready for bed or getting up in the morning. You have a routine. You follow it without being aware of it. It's very, natural, intuitive to you. And it's tied to a given context. When you're home, you do this certain habit. If you're in a different place, then that habit may not operate. Habits are tied to given contexts, and once they're formed, they're very resistant to change for better or worse. Which means if you have a good habit, it's good because you follow that habit, without even thinking about it. If it's a bad habit, it's really hard to change because you have to consciously change that kind of habit. Anytime you're in a new context, you create new habits based on what your desired goals might be. So you're going to college is a new context for you. So you're going to create new habits. The key is to create good habits from the very start, because that is much easier to do that than it is to create bad habits and then try and change them. When you create a habit, then you need to figure out what goals you want. You should create a routine to achieve that goal. It should be easy as possible. It should be repeated, and it should be rewarded. Finding a way to reward that habit. If you have a bad habit, you need to break that habit by changing the context or disrupting the routine, creating some way of increasing difficulty, and replacing it with a better habit. But like I say, creating good habits from the start is easier than changing bad habits. So what are some habits that you should form when you are starting college? Okay, number one habit is class attendance. You should have a routine for class attendance. That should be your default, going to class. If you have a good professor, then the class is by far your most valuable learning resource that you will have. And so your default routine should go to class. If you start off the school semester or your college career not going to class, that instantly creates a habit where you start to thinking, should I go to class or not? Your default should simply be to go to class. Okay. Secondly, is once you're in class, you should engage the class intellectually. And typically that involves taking effective notes. So note-taking is a matter of engaging your mind in a talk and thinking, listening to the presentation and writing down key points. Okay, note-taking is not transcription. It's not recording everything that the professor says. You need to think it through and write down the key points. This helps to keep you engaged. Helps focus your attention and get the most out of that talk. So anytime you're in a presentation, academic presentation, you should be taking notes on that information. This is especially true with online learning. A lot of times students think, if it's online, I want to take notes. Even there, to help you to engage yourself intellectually, you should be taking notes. Okay, you should develop effective study routines and study without distractions. So effective study routine would be getting those distractions out of your way, like putting your phone in a drawer or in the next room and studying effectively. So good study habits would be like studying for 20 or 25 minutes with no distraction, and then rewarding yourself with a few minutes of like doing whatever you want to do. Make it easy. Reward yourself for good study habits and repeat that as often as you can. It becomes easier with practice. An effective assignment completion routine. So anytime you get a class assignment, you should instantly record, on your calendar the date it's due. You should set a time to read the instructions. You should set a date when you want to be done with this. That's prior to the date that it's due, so you have like leeway and you can have time to correct anything that might go wrong. You need to create a routine for completing assignments, or like reading assignments, assigned readings. What is your routine for doing the readings? Then you need an effective preparation routine. So for example, your routine might be to have read all the notes and all the required readings 3 days before the exam. That's your routine. Then you spend the next few days in review. That would be an effective preparation routine for preparing for exams. Then you need a regular sleep and exercise routine. This, of course, is important for your personal well-being and for stress control, regular sleep, regular exercise routines, but it's also important for learning. Sleep is an important component for learning. You retain more if you have regular sleep routines. And exercise is important for maintaining good attention and for creativity. So develop really good regular sleep and exercise routines as well. So these are good habits for you to work on in college. Now, the next thing you need to worry about is learning resources. So here's a list of all the different resources that are available to you. And this may be an incomplete list depending on where you're at, but I've tried to list all the different resources available to you that support your learning. So I've already talked about class presentations. Their validity is high. If you have a good professor, that professor has outlined for you the learning goals for your class, and the presentations reflect those learning goals, and the assessments, the exams, and the assignments that the professor gives reinforce those learning goals, right? So the class presentations should be by far the most valuable learning resource that you have. So validity is high. In other words, you can assume that the information is accurate, it's relevant to your class, and the value is high. The learning activities, the examples that the teacher puts you through are also very valuable. So if you have a good professor, they will have learning activities to give you feedback about your learning, about your level of understanding. It will give you a chance to practice what you've learned. And these are incredibly valuable activities. So there's a tendency to try and hack these, like, oh, I can, this is a worksheet. I can just look up an answer on Google or something like that. You're actually undermining your own learning if you don't go through the learning activity and complete it and understand what you're supposed to gain from it. And so you take note of those learning activities because they can help you in preparing for the exam. Examples that the professor gives you are also quite valuable. As you take notes, take notes that monitor your understanding. Like, this is an example, and you can go back and say, how is this example illustrative of the concept? That's a very powerful learning activity to go through. So record examples. If you have questions as you're going through, put a big question mark there to go back and ask the professor about it or ask your classmates about that. Okay, teacher feedback on assignments and exams. This is an often underutilized source of learning resource for students. Your score and exam will give you feedback about the effectiveness of your study strategies, your preparation. If you didn't do well, that means that there's problems in the way you prepare for the exam, and you need to make changes. So you should look at that exam and look at what you missed and try and figure out why you missed it. Have you been skipping classes? That might be a problem. If the information was not your notes, but it was covered in class, then maybe your notes need to be more effective. Maybe you need to collaborate with other classmates on getting more complete notes. Was it in the textbook? So maybe you need to focus more on the textbook. So feedback on assignments, on exams, and on learning activities are incredibly valuable to you in identifying what you understand, what you need to work more on, how you need to change your study strategies. Textbook and readings obviously are very important. You need to have a good way of studying those textbooks and those readings. And then the syllabus is actually quite valuable also. A lot of times faculty will put information on the syllabus that is valuable to you, how to study, how to prepare, other resources that the professor recommends. So, refer back to the syllabus, for policies, but also for learning support information. Of course, there's a course website and the learning management system. Oftentimes faculty will put resources there that will help you, extra learning activities that might help you. So always check the course website. And then you can meet with the professor. So sometimes faculty or sometimes students are reluctant to do this, but you absolutely have the right to meet with your professor. And most faculty, you will find, want to help students. They want to help students to succeed. So what you need to do is be prepared for this meeting. Be specific about, the problems that you're having. Tell the professor, this is the where I'm confused. This is how I've tried to address this. I've looked at the the textbook, or I've reviewed what the lecture is, and this is the kind of problem I'm having. And then the faculty member will be able to help you directly. If you just simply say, I don't understand, then the faculty member doesn't really know how to help you. So, come prepared with very specific kinds of issues, and talk about the kinds of things that you've tried to do to address those problems. Meeting with TAs is also useful if you have a TA in your course, but oftentimes the TAs are not part of the class. Sometimes TAs will attend class, sometimes they won't. So they may be very knowledgeable, but they may not know what the professor is emphasizing and how the professor is presenting information. So TAs are valid sources of information, but they may or may not, their usefulness may vary depending on how connected they are to the class. Textbooks have websites, which may be very valuable for supplemental information, for test quizzes, for example, but their value may be variable because the textbook website reflects the textbook uniformly, and the professor may be emphasizing certain concepts over others. Classmates, the same thing. Some of them may be more helpful than others. You need to figure out who is a reliable source of information and who is going to be most helpful to you. But clearly working together, supporting each other, sharing notes, for example, quizzing each other can be very valuable. Then the institution is also going to have learning resources. Like most all institutions have some sort of academic success center or reading study skills center. If you need help with study skills and time management, or some of these places offer supplemental instruction where they have people who specialize in particular courses, that might be a good resource for you. Tutoring is valuable if you're having trouble with the content, understanding the content. If your problem is poor study skills, though, tutoring is probably not going to be helpful to you. Then there's a whole list of third-party electronic resources, topical websites, electronic flashcard sites that have like definitions built in, videos that are related to what you're learning, and then homework websites. These can be variable usefulness. You don't know how relevant the information is, and just gathering a lot of information that may or may not be useful is not a good use of your time. So they vary in their validity and they vary in their educational value. So stick to what the professor is setting up for you, at least initially. You should be able to find a way to learn from that professor. That's kind of your job as a student. And the faculty member's job is to find a way to help you learn. Then the final things are paper mills or existing papers that you find. They are of questionable value. You don't know how the quality of those papers, and really, they have little educational value because you are basically borrowing someone else's work. It's academically dishonest, and it can get you into a lot of trouble. So take a look at all these learning resources and make the best use of these learning resources to ensure your success. Okay, so let's talk about common student pitfalls. I've already talked about bad habits, right? I've talked a bit about not having a learning mindset, having those beliefs that undermine your learning. So as you approach a course, have an open mind. Okay, try and understand why this is important for you to learn. Like, what is the reason why this might be a required course for you? How might this be helpful in your career? What sort of goals will this course help you to achieve? So look at it as a building block to success. Look at the professor and look at the enthusiasm and passion that the professor has, and try to capture that enthusiasm, and that will just make the course that much more enjoyable for you. If you simply see it as a box that needs to be checked off and something to be got through with as little effort as possible, it's going to be more grueling for you. Having a learning mindset, where you find a justification to do the work that's necessary, is going to be a lot more interesting for you, and you may find that you really do enjoy the course more than you thought you might. Using ineffective learning strategies is a huge problem. I actually have videos that I will share with you at the end of this video on that. I talk about note taking. Note taking engages your interest, but it also helps you to learn. Now, one of the major problems that students have is they confuse study time and accessibility and familiarity with learning. So study time, they think, well, I study 8 hours, then I've learned it, but and they don't study effectively. And it's the quality of the study time, not just the amount, that really matters. Accessibility, this is like when you have like recorded lectures and you listen to them in the car where you're not really paying attention. Just because it's accessible to you doesn't mean that you've learned it. You've really got to engage in it. You've really got to think about it meaningfully. And then familiarity is where you just look at your notes over and over again, not really thinking about them. Familiarity is not the same as learning. So what students are doing here is avoiding what's called desirable difficulty. Desirable difficulty is effort that you put out that is slow in terms of immediate learning, but it results in better long-term recall. So cramming, you hear a lot about cramming. Cramming actually leads to good immediate recall, but you forget very, very rapidly. Learning through desirable difficulty is slower initially, but it leads to much better long-term recall. There's a number of different ways of achieving desirable difficulty: deep processing, which is elaborating, thinking about information meaningfully; spacing out your practice; interleaving means where you switch back and forth between different topics. Reading one, then going to another one, and then going back and reviewing that first topic. Then, testing yourself is good ways of achieving desirable difficulty. That's what you really want to accomplish. And avoiding that desirable difficulty is just putting off learning and actually hurting yourself in the long run. And the byproduct of poor learning strategies is overconfidence, where you feel like you know it, and then you end up not doing well on the exams, not making full use of learning resources, not studying at the proper level of detail. I kind of talked about that already with attention, where you're studying at a level of rote memorization, whereas the professor is testing at a level of sort of meaningful relationships. Okay, that is sort of studying at the wrong level of detail, and not assessing and monitoring your level of understanding. As you go through, you should take every opportunity to get feedback about your level of understanding and try and make sure that it's at the level that the professor wants. So this is something called self-regulation of learning, okay, where you set your goals and you plan your learning strategies out for a course. You initiate those goals, you monitor your progress and understanding, modifying them as needed. So maybe this learning strategy is not working out for you, so you try and change. And then, you evaluate your outcome. So you use the feedback to set new goals and plans and different strategies. And you repeat this until it's successful. This is what it looks like in terms of a cycle. You start with the planning phase. Starting here, you think about, what do I want to accomplish? What are my resources? How am I going to accomplish this? Right? Then you initiate your learning strategies, you monitor your understanding. Like as you're taking notes, you put question mark as to I don't understand this. So you monitor your level of understanding and your progress. You cope with any obstacles that you have. And then at the end of that process, you evaluate, how close am I to my goal? If your goal has been achieved, then you're done. If not, you repeat it by planning new goals and using what you've learned from the first cycle to improve your efficiency. So for each course you take, then you need to kind of go through the self-regulation of learning to adapt your learning strategies to the particular course that you're taking. So that's called self-regulation of learning, and it involves all the things that I've been talking about here. So here are some resources to help you out. If you want some information about how to plan for study time, here's an activity that I created that has 3 different plans that you might consider. And this handout has 3 plans that you can think about, and then it has discussion afterwards on the pros and cons of each discussion. So that's to help you to plan how you would study. If you need help with study skills, I've got 2 resources for you. is a video series on how to get the most out of studying that I have. It's a series of 5 videos plus an optional introductory video if you want. So you can watch the video that is particularly relevant to you. If you want a general overview of how to learn effectively, I have this video which talks about the constraints and pitfalls of learning. So it gives you just a general overview of the challenges that learning presents. So to summarize, college is a very new and different learning context, and you have to change and adapt to it. And this is going to require effort and intentional, habit change on your part. Forming good habits from the start pays off in the long run. Knowing the learning resources and how to use them is a good way of avoiding the common student pitfalls. And the ultimate goal is to develop self-regulation, plan, monitor, evaluate, and repeat. So if you do these sorts of things, then it'll help you to make the most of your learning opportunities, and it will increase the likelihood that you will be successful in college level work. So thank you for listening to this video, and I wish you great success in your academic endeavors.